advice would I give to my younger self? I get asked this all the time. And to be honest, I hope little Sara would have time to sit down with me for a cup of tea, because I've got quite a few bits of advice for her, actually. There's a few things she needed to hear. First thing I'd tell her is you can learn from every situation. So if I look back, long before I started my own business, I did a gap year at university and I went to work for this tiny little craft company. And it was quite an interesting year, actually. And I would say over the course of the year, I had a lot of experiences, some of them great, some of them not so great. And it's actually the experiences that weren't so great that I learned the most from. Now, it's really hard in that moment to appreciate that because it's difficult. And actually, if I look back on my whole life, I've had a lot of experiences in my life that haven't been so good. But you can either just sweep those experiences under the carpet and imagine that they never happened, or you can really reflect on them and see what you learn from them. And if I look back on my growth and my journey as an entrepreneur over the last 20 years, it's really been those moments that haven't gone so well that I've later reflected on and looked at the personal learnings I've taken from, where I've really achieved true growth. And I know it sounds very airy-fairy and up here. But I think if you do reflect on your life, you will find that you'll learn more from the difficult times and the ones that haven't been so successful than you will from the really great times, okay? Secondly, I tell Sara that business isn't personal. And the sooner you can learn this, the better. Now, I was quite lucky in that I did learn this lesson maybe 3 years into my business journey. A lot of women I speak to, a lot of people in business I speak to don't learn it till much later on in life. I learned it when we went through a really big legal battle. So there was a company called Helix. You might remember them, used to make protractors and stationery. And they decided to get into the craft market. And they'd obviously analysed the market, seen my product, thought, that's a great product, we'll rip that off. And then all they'd done is they'd done all the due diligence. They'd looked at my patents, the intellectual property I had on the product, weighed up how strong that was, whether or not it was worth taking the risk on knocking off my product versus someone else's, decided it was a commercial risk worth doing. I can say that now, all these years later, with the benefit of hindsight. In that moment, it didn't feel like that. It felt so personal. I was devastated. It was as though Mr. Helix himself had it in for Sara. I couldn't believe that somebody was so nasty. Someone was out to destroy me. They were going to be awful. How could they do this? I was riddled with anger, and I let that anger eat at me. And I let it define the decisions I made in that moment. Now, luckily for me, we kind of had a happy ending, as happy as it can be in this. It was a really stressful period in my life. We had a successful outcome in terms of we came to a mutual agreement to move on. But it wasn't until years later, when I really reflected on that time in my life, that I learned it wasn't personal for Helix. They weren't out to get me. They just looked at that moment and thought, that's a great product. Commercially, we think we can do this. We'll give that a go. It's just business. It's not personal. Okay? Now, third piece of advice that I would give to my younger self is the ability to be flexible and creative is really the key to success. So when I very, very first started in business, my first idea was a product called the Enveloper. So it was a product for making handmade envelopes for people who made their own handmade cards. And I designed the product. I had this idea of what I was going to do. And then I went and got a quote from a company to have it made, and it was going to cost £30,000 to have that product tooled and made in plastic. Didn't have £30,000. I was a bootstrap business just starting out. I had a couple of grand of savings, and that was it. Now, a lot of people would give up at that point. They were thwarted at the first hurdle. That's it. The business wasn't going to go anywhere. Well, you've got to think creatively. You've got to think around the solution. And what I came up with was, actually, we can make them out of MDF. We can make them out of wood. Yes, they're going to cost 2 or 3 times more to produce each one. However, I don't have this massive setup cost. And I think trying to find a different way to get to the same outcome, it might not be as great, but it was a way that I could achieve. And that was the first of many hurdles that I had to overcome in my early business career. And it really did teach me that creativity and flexibility are the absolute key attributes to being a really successful entrepreneur. And the last thing I would tell little Sara is to work with the best people you possibly can. You've got to spend a lot of time with these people, so you've got to enjoy working with them as well as having people who are brilliant at what they do. So often I see people being really protective of the empire that they're trying to create. And they're terrified that if they work with people who are better than them, heaven forbid they might get found out. And if they get found out, then their value is going to be diminished. And I just think it's ridiculous. I've learned that if you work with the best people, your business will flourish, not flounder. And that's really, really key. Surround yourself with people who are better than you. And if they're better than you, they will be the ones driving your business forward. If you only ever hire people to do what you tell them, your business is always going to be limited by your own skills. The best business people I see are fantastic leaders. Leaders are amazing people and brilliant at surrounding themselves with the best people. Now, little Sara learned that really early on in her business career, and look where it's got her. So I really hope those bits of business advice, if you can learn them and take them from me early on in your career, hopefully they'll have a massive, profound impact.